All right, welcome to another episode of the Middle-Aged Metalhead. Today we've got regular contributor Abhishek Sen with us, and we've got one of my favorite artists in the local scene, Achintya Venkatesh. Hi, Achintya, how are you today?
Greetings, gentlemen. Pleasure to be on as always. Doing good. How about you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. Dabi, how are you?
Good, good. I'm doing well, and yeah, I mean, Achintya, of course, is one of my both of our favorite visual artists, so as to say, and been following his work for a while. So this should make for a great conversation. Considering that we have a lot of things that we have in common, a lot of taste in art, music, and obviously bands as well. So we'll start off with an origin story, so as to say. GK, over to you.
Yeah, how did this interest in being an artist in the old-fashioned sense start? Like, what was the trigger point?
Oh,
And how was it at home? Did you grow up in a artistic environment? What was the encouragement like uh, in your within your family as well?
yeah. So I would say the origin story is every kid loves just scribbling on paper. So I think I've been doing that since I was 4. So I would just sit for entire days, sort of, drawing on a paper and not moving at all. In fact, I would have to be sort of shifted out of place for meals or to like go do some other whatever homework or whatever. So I would say it's kind of innate. There's a sort of, I don't know, synchronistic story or anecdote that I have to share as well. So my mother was painting when she was pregnant with me. So I don't think that's much of a coincidence right there. She was doing sort of like oil painting recreations of like, 16th, 17th century European sort of oil painting. So I would say that's the origin. Um, yes, the household was definitely very encouraging. They continue to be very encouraging of the craft, so to speak. So I was put in formal art classes that helped to a certain extent, but nothing that really sort of acted as a stimuli for my current style or flair. So that's the background.
Okay. So, speaking of your current style, right? How would you describe it? Because it is visually, I would say, very striking. The themes are largely Indian, mythological, historical. Can I say religious?
Yes,
Or
yes, all of
yeah,
those.
all of those, right? Yeah. So, how would you describe your style of art?
So I've come to call it mythopoetic art. That's just the word that sort of resonates with me and struck it. So there are two parts to it. As I always say, there is the anatomical and design part of it, which is musculature, facial features, the anthropological aspect of it, so to speak. Things like jewelry, clothing, like crowns and whatnot. So that's the physical. But then what informs the physical is the metaphysical as well, right? So that's where I believe the theology, the religiosity, and the historical aspect comes in. So now there is of course a cadre of artists online who are very like sticklers for historicity, wherein they won't portray something that is outside of what's found in the archaeological record. Obviously, when you're dealing with theology and mythology, I'm personally and most other artists in this sort of niche are not beholden to what's in archaeology. Though I do think being having that archaeological fidelity is good as well. So I do incorporate it like as like Easter eggs in my art, but I would say largely it's like a free flow of imagination, but also sticking to a sort of cultural context where it makes sense. So it should look distinctly Vedic or distinctly Hindu. It should like a mistake a lot of artists make when trying to sort of express these archetypes is going fully Western, which I don't
Right.
think is culturally appropriate. Obviously, these concepts, deities and gods transcend culture and well Earth itself, but nevertheless, it's our cultural eye for those archetypes that transcend space and time. So you should keep it sort of homely, but also obviously transcendent. So, of course, a balance is the long and short of it.
So you've also described I mean, you went into the mythopoetic aspect of it all, and when I have seen your art, and we have gone through it in not so many words, but they do feel very ritualistic in nature.
Mhm.
So, does your art actually, is it a kind of an offering, or maybe an act of devotion, or perhaps even a confrontation to the norms that they are?
they're all of that. I would say your reading is completely correct. They're all of that. See, the only way you can truly portray what's in your heart, so to speak, and offer that devotion to these deities from beyond. First of all, we have to get outside of the realm of the rational, right? So you can't ever think completely rationally in all this. You are communing with a part of yourself, but also you're also communing with something that's much beyond you and transcends conventional space time. That's how I would describe a god to begin with. The reason people ask for proof is because they exist in planes and dimensions that are immeasurable to us. So number one, let's not even get into that rationality aspect of it. So that's what I would say as a word of caution. But yes, they are like ritual offerings. They are something that you see sort of in the mind's eye through a certain amount of. It's a mixture of, again, the rational and the irrational, so to speak. Which one is like, say, meditation, contemplation upon the deities, reading upon them, reading the sacred texts. But then the other is also adding like a sort of very worldly, fantastical aspect to it, which is like informed by, say, comic books, other artists, obviously, things which you can touch and feel, like our temple sculptures, which itself have multiple sacred texts and shastras dedicated to how and why they're supposed to be, what informs the iconography, so to speak, right? There is a science to it, why certain deities display certain traits. They're not just by, oh, this looks cool or this design is nice, which is why iconography is very important as well. And something you should stay, to my point earlier, you should stay sort of adherent to.
Right. Because you mentioned in the past, in our conversations as well, that you've been influenced by the works of, say, a Grant Morrison, who blurs boundaries between what is myth, what is fiction, and lived reality. You have spoken about the Alan Moore's latter-day work, like the Necronomicon, etc. So is your approach also similar into your artistic universe? Like you take the Vedic text and you often read it as philosophy, as poetry, or even cosmology. How does that interpret? Because you are transcending two worlds here. So how do you interpret those source materials and inspirations to make it something much more intimate? Because when I see and read the descriptions or your voiceovers, which you do over these amazingly detailed works of art, how does that happen?
Oh, yeah, I mean, Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, of course, are hugely influential to my thought process, especially the great Grand Mage Morrison. So, in fact, I got into this whole rabbit hole, or rather revival of this rabbit hole and this new way of thinking about it through Grant Morrison's sort of lectures and writings on chaos magic. I'm sure you've read his book as well, Super Gods, where he puts it very poignantly. So, see, there's the real, right, what you can touch and feel, and then there's the hyper real, wherein even if these ideas aren't, so to speak, something you can touch and feel, they still affect life, right? So they're about as real as, say, me and you interacting with each other, and where we can 100% say, yes, this is a provable fact. So I always conceive the gods as hyper real. They touch you and affect our ways of thinking from a realm beyond which you can't comprehend. So definitely that Grant Morrison way of thinking is very, very integral to the way I view these things. But I'm not going to give full credit only to Grant Morrison, because this sort of metaphysical thinking is there very much in our scriptural lore itself. So one mistake, and as you well know, the main subject of my art, or rather my signature art series these days, is the Rigvedic or the Vedic pantheon series, right? So one mistake, and especially from a colonial lens, a lot of people make is that, oh, these are just praise hymns to forces of nature like rain, thunder, water, etc. And it's sort of a primitive stage in our religion, which I completely disagree with. You should, I would urge viewers to, say, read the commentaries of the likes of Sri Aurobindo, and as well as more ancient than him, Sayanacharya, who interpreted these texts. And I think the language, once you learn Sanskrit, is self-evident that there is a lot of very, very, very sophisticated metaphysical sort of messages, esotericism already encoded in these hymns. They're not just praise hymns saying, please give us rain, please give us riches. It is that. It is that. Don't get me wrong. It is life affirming in the sense that they're asking for something from the deities. But aside from that, there is a lot of metaphysical encoding which obviously informs the later stages of the religion itself, where it becomes a little more explicit, like as in, say, Advaita Vedanta and whatnot, which is a little bit more famous, right? And of course, the epics, Mahabharata, Ramayana. I mean, they more or less need no introduction to most people. But what I seek to do through my art is to highlight the fact that it is already sophisticated. And later Hinduism is not building upon a primitive base of just some pastoral people doing fire rituals, but those folk, that first generation of rishis or sages, are already sophisticated. In the Rig Veda, for example, we see historically we conceive of that as like the first stage of Hinduism, right? But in the Rig Veda itself, they say, oh, these generations of seers who lived before us for 1,000 years. So if we're talking about the first stage, talking about people who are 1,000 years prior to them. So you can imagine that whatever led to its codification is already sophisticated. And of course, I mean, to put it very simply, these deities of this Vedic corpus have very few like visual depictions. So unlike say Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Puranas, which you would have seen a dime a dozen art by now. So
Right.
I
You're
think
on mute.
yeah.
So was that what sparked your interest in the Rig Veda period specifically? The lack of a sort of visual notification or visual standpoint of that period?
No, I would say
Because
this is like the second step rather. As a kid, so when I was around 14 and 15, I got deeply into anthropology and population genetics. And so basically the question was, why is India the way it is? You know, it's a chaotic tapestry of a million cultures and languages and whatnot. And my question was to solve the mystery slash problem slash beauty of India. Right? So that was like my base point. And as you get into this, you start to understand the peopling of India. Like Indians aren't one monolithic people from ancient times. We're a mixture of many races, even at a say prehistory level. So it's because of that where you sort of study like there's this hunter-gatherer era of India, Paleolithic, and then agriculture starts, and then you have the Indus Valley civilization, and in turn you sort of have a gradation into the Vedic age, right? So it's that sort of stages of history of like really old antiquity of India that got me into this. And so to speak, Rig Veda is, for all intents and purposes, the oldest religious text, surviving text in the world. So, which is still codified to this day and is a living tradition. More importantly, there are many traditions of the old world civilizations that have sort of come and gone, but this is still alive. You can go to your local temple and still hear many of these hymns in their original form as they would have been, say, 4,000 years ago. So, like, there's this anthropologist slash researcher called Asko Papola, who very poignantly describes it, saying that it's hearing, say, the Nambudri priests of Kerala today is like a tape recording from 1500 BC. So, because it's been maintained with that orthodoxy, and frankly, only orthodoxy can maintain it for so long.
yeah.
Otherwise, it gets wiped out with being wishy-washy about it.
Right. So, it's interesting that you mentioned this, considering that we are and we continue to live in Bangalore, which in itself is a center of cultural contradictions. You have your tech-driven modernity,
Yeah.
and then in one side, and the other side is that old spiritual currents that play a huge role in the people who live here. So, how does that contradiction play a role in what you do, and how does that shape you as an artist? I know you touched upon this slightly earlier, but if you want to go into slightly more details about on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I would say what modernity offers is the luxury to do this, right? I wouldn't be able to do this as a seer or some sort of sadhu meditating in the forest back in 2500 BC. So modernity and modern tech allows you to be able to express these ideas in far more refined, far more iterative, and the ideas continually evolve. So, I mean, look, I'm not one of those folks who would say, hey, I'm going to go, ultimately my dream is to disappear into nature. And I mean, for some time, yes, but I do like city life, to put it very simply. So I think that the convenience of city life affords you this luxury to even be able to express these things, right? So reach a certain socio-economic class, whatnot. So that's obviously the practical aspect of it. But in terms of the city itself, I mean, see, it's a cosmopolitan city. all three of us are from like different ethnicities. We have different mother tongues and whatnot. So you come from all walks of life, and that sort of, it's a full circle movement, right? You are born into something. You meet a whole swath of people. Your exposure sort of broadens, and then you come back to a sort of return to roots, which is but it is still slight. In my case, at least, it's not like a return to roots. It's more like a come back to roots and take a diversion type, because the the culture and the hymns of the Rig Veda are not exactly like the core culture from which I'm from, right? Vaishnavites are sort of sectarian, whereas the Vedic corpus is sort of takes a backseat in most Hindus today. So it's a return to roots beyond just like conventional birth-based circumstances. So I don't know if that answers your question, though.
No, it kind of does, and we can talk about uh, how a city shapes the sounds, the look, even the way we speak.
Yeah.
I mean, it's defined by essentially we are products, and all we do are products of our environment, which brings me to one interesting facet about your work. Over the past few years, you have also delved a lot into working visually with a lot of bands, very famously with one of my favorite current local bands, which is Bhasmasura Immolation. You worked with Infamy in the past as well. When you collaborate with musicians, do you see this art and your entire aspect of this art as an extension of their sound, or as a parallel vision that exists alongside it?
Right. So I'm lucky enough to, so far in all the commissions that I've done, uh, most of the folks have given me a very free hand in what should be portrayed and whatnot. I sort of work in a fairly structured manner in that I need a concept note, and thereon I can sort of elaborate on the vision. I'll give them like a rough draft saying that, hey, this X, Y, Z is going to be placed in such and such positioning. Based on this, I'm going to interpret it from my lens as this. Is this okay or not? I guess that's a standard sort of iterative process. But obviously, anything I'm going to illustrate is going to have my touch. So that's like a subconscious thing anyway. But for the most part, I would like their visions to be realized through me. So my vision anyway is being realized through my own personal art, right? So that's an aside. In terms of musicians, I want their vision to be portrayed in the best manner possible. I don't see it as anything parallel. I see it as like a continuity of their music, and if it serves them more, and if they are happier with it rather than me being particularly happy with it. I mean, obviously, I should be at a basic level happy with the composition, the coloring, and whatnot. So yeah, I would say it's the further there goes.
So how does that? Can you just talk about more about how it came about with Bhasmasura Emulation? How you working with them visually, because they have a very unique look and sound to it, and obviously the visuals attached to it elevate the sound because no one else. And GK, correct me if I'm wrong. No one else is doing what they're doing, especially with their sound, with their the way they look, and obviously the packaging of it all.
Yeah, so Basma, of course, BI, the lads in BI are my very, very good friends. So, and they're very good friends, not only through the sort of metal aficionado connection, but we also geek out majorly on religion, anthropology, history, population genetics. Everything I said sort of served as an initial impetus towards my art as well, particularly Nagapisacha. So me and Nagapisacha often have parallel, like individual conversations among ourselves about all this. We keep sending each other sort of papers, articles, these anecdotes from Reddit and whatnot. So we at one point in perhaps 2023 end, 2024 early, probably 2023 end, we got deep into this rabbit hole of comparative Indo-European mythology. Right, so I've always been into it. He sort of had a revival of sorts with me. So that Bhasmasura demo cover in specific, it sort of like arose out of this comparative analysis on why Odin and Rudra or Shiva represent the very same archetype, right? To put it very briefly, they're both sky fathers. They both have a staff or a trident that sort of is the conduit for their power. They both have striker sons. One is Thor, one is Skanda or Muruga, right? They both have a host of legions or armies behind them who are like sort of like they're kind of, I don't know how to put it, they're wild, right? The Einerjar as well as the Ganas are they're like not like sattvic as Hindus put it, right?
Yeah.
Which is like all like sweet and nice. They're like wild.
Violent.
So they're like there are many parallels as well as that they all both have like sort of divine insight. They're both gods of like yoga, so to speak, right? Divine illumination and sacrificing themselves to realize the self. So we got into this whole rabbit hole, and so as it happens, both of them are also associated with this specific type of birds called corvid birds, which are like ravens, crows, carrion birds, and whatnot, right? So as you can see, those wings on GK's shirt and the cover as well, it sort of arises out of that. And both of them represent a sort of archetypal masculine. So we started playing with these ideas, and that's what led to the sort of iconography you see on the cover. And which is why those flowy liquids you see coming out of the lingam, so to speak, well, I don't have to name what it is, but it's sort of a cosmic ejaculation, so to speak, right? So we started playing with these ideas of like, archetypal masculine, feminine, as well as this Indo-European mythology. So it sort of worked like that. It sort of ended up working like that. And yeah, it's because of that inherent shared interest and the frequent nerding out we do.
And I know you've been part of the local metal scene for as long as I can remember. Has there ever been like a cross pollination? Anything? Has your art been influenced or inspired by metal, or has your views on metal been inspired by your art?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's an absolute load of cross pollination. So I view metal as like music for the Maruts, or like the storm hosts of Indra, or like Shiva's Ganas. So I feel like it's active, caustic, sort of abrasive mantra. So for me, both of them have always fed into each other. I think first of all, metal is very mythological. The whole draw of the genre for me is the themes, the imagery, of course the sound. Sound itself like sort of paints a picture without any album cover, so to speak. So like the likes of say an Immortal sounds like a snowstorm. It doesn't even you don't have to have cover to sort of get that feel, right? So they definitely feed into each other. I don't know about the local scene, so to speak, but the likes of say dark fantasy artists like Frazetta, Boris Vayelo, all those folks have obviously very much influenced me, and they have influenced metal in droves. So definitely.
Yeah, because I know for a fact that you are hugely into black metal
Yeah.
as much as I am, and it's obviously seen as, or some parts of it are still seen as to be purely nihilistic. So, but if you go deeper into the lore of black metal or extreme metal, it's essentially not that. It's not supposed to be like that. The roots aren't that. But to you as an artist, what does that embody, and how does that inform the visual and the mythological layers of that work? If you look at specifically at black metal or bands who are black metal adjacent.
Right. So here's the thing. The way I view it is nihilism, blasphemy, and whatnot are the first step towards realizing what's beyond. Because these are like sort of concepts that help you at least question the conventional paradigm of okay, you got to accept it as it is. I think at the heart of it, all of us are rebels in some way. There's one nerdy aspect, but there's also the rebellion aspect, right? So that's the first step. But what I'd like to caution metalheads is that that isn't the end. The dragon of nihilism and negation is something that you need to battle. It isn't the savior. You have to wrestle with that dragon, so to speak, right? And so that's the way I see it, in terms of how it feeds into metal. What's beyond that is something that I would say can be parallel in say Bathory's discography, right? Bathory starts out as a fairly thematically rudimentary satanic band, and of course, under the sign of the Black Mark, he gets a little bit more existential, and you can see that as a sort of turning point where he's like, okay, just saying God is bad doesn't quite cut it, which is why it gets it returns to roots, his own roots, so to speak, in the subsequent albums, and of course he goes full bard mode, Germanic bard mode, so to speak, later on. So I would say that is like the perfect journey in terms of what would parallel my art vis-a-vis metal, or rather, I should say that Quorthon is a huge inspiration for me. And in terms of like just the aesthetic, I emphasize, I think more is more, as the great Yngwie Malmsteen once said. So more detail, more elements, more, and you might have noticed that I like a grainy texture, line work heavy texture.
Yeah.
So I would say that itself is inherently has a kind of a metal aesthetic, so to speak, right? Subconsciously, that definitely shows. Whereas most Indic artists, so to speak, especially because of this typeface, or what do I call it, templatized calendar art. Most gods have like very sort of perfectly done eyebrows, beautiful, like almost ruby red lipstick like lips, and they just look really soft. That's not something I want at all, because they're not described like that to begin with in text. It's not like I'm inventing something. It's like I'm bringing it back to the fidelity with the text, but with my own flair, of course. So I would say that's the sort of relation with that.
Can we see some of what you're talking about?
Sure. I'm gonna just display my screen.
And while you're displaying your screen, I would highly recommend. We'll be putting Achintya's Instagram page as well in the description of this video. So if you come across this video and you're watching this and you've made it this far, please ensure to check out his artwork on his Instagram page. It has very detailed captions as to what it implies, what the inspirations of this are, and how he came about to interpret what you can see on screen currently. Achintya, would you want to take us through what you're showing us?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for me, logically, this is the first piece to show you, because I guess it's my most well-known piece across the internet. I've seen various random anonymous handles on Twitter and Instagram sort of having this as their profile picture. So that says something about how far this particular piece has reached. So this is the most famous tale from the Rig Veda, which is Indra's triumph over Vritra. So Vritra is a dragon-like Asura, or a serpent-like Asura, so to speak. He's not even called an Asura, rather, in the earliest layers. He's called a Danava, which is a certain celestial class. So he is sort of an allegory for being an enveloper. So the whole thing is that Indra battles this proverbial chaos, and from the result of this whole battle is that the 7 rivers, or the Sapta Sindhu as they call it, are sort of freed, and fertility is back. So it's a huge agricultural allegory. Some people, which I do think this is a fringe view, talk about it as a sort of allegory for the end of the Ice Age. I think that's a little whacked out, but I like whacked out ideas, so make of that as you will. So yeah, so I would say this is one of those. I can move on to the next, perhaps. This is one of my latest pieces.
Yeah.
You will find that through this whole Rigvedic artwork series, naturally Indra is the subject matter of much of it. So this sort of shows Indra slaying this again another asura called Namuchi. Namuchi again means not letting go. So the background behind this is that Indra is sort of excluded from a fire ritual or a yajna, so to speak, and he's denied the soma by this god called Twastar, who is the cosmic sort of artisan or architect, so to speak, right? But he, nevertheless, in his impetuous sort of way, storms in and steals the soma. But that soma is poisoned, right? And so, because Indra suffers, but then as he's suffering and that life force is sort of going out of him, this gentleman who's being beheaded here steals the soma, steals that divine essence, so to speak. And of course, a lot of narrative shenanigans happen wherein the Ashwin twins, who are the healer twins, with Vak Saraswati, sort of forge this specific type of Vajra, this thunder weapon you see, right? But it's hidden in foam. So Namuchi basically has this conditions that he can't be killed day or night, or outside or inside, very similar to the tale of Narasimha and Hiranyakashipu. In fact, I would say this is the prototype for that tale. So, with the long and short of it is he with this foam forged Vajra, which is what this sort of depicts over here, rather subtly, he beheads Namachi. And again, see the theme, these might seem like just cosmic fights at first, which they are, right, at the baseline. But the broader allegory of it is Indra represents this concept called Rita, which is cosmic order. And the opposite of that is Anrita, chaos, basically. So Indra is more than a storm god or a god of rains and whatnot. In the early Vedic corpus, he is a god of order, and he's a god of divine illumination. So this is the second piece. All right, so this is an exclusive Middle-Aged Metalhead podcast debut. So this is my latest addition to the Vedic Pantheon Vision series. This derives from the Kaushiki Upanishad, which is Indra revealing himself as the essence of life, which is called Prana, which is one and the same with the Vedantic Brahman, or the monotheistic, closest idea to the monotheistic god we have in Hinduism and the Vedic corpus, so to speak. So of course depicted is Indra. So the whole point behind this was to make it sort of quasi-psychedelic, which is why you see those nodes of existence and whatnot behind them, right? So that was the whole thought process behind this. So as you can see, I do imply his sort of storm god connection with the way the hair is and lightning that's there. And he's like sort of making a proclamation of sorts. In typical Indra fashion, he also has a third eye, right? And this gauntlet is just something that to represent his kingship, so to speak. And this gauntlet over here, this gauntlet over here also says Rita in Sanskrit. So again, it represents the Vedic term for cosmic order. This king who is sort of listening to this proto Bhagavad Gita, so to speak, is Pratardana Devodasi, who is an ancient ruler of Kashi, which is of course modern day Varanasi. So in this, in his jewelry, I sort of attempted to put in iconography related to Kashi as well. So these little swirls and whatnot that you see over here in his jewelry are derived from Kashi Mahajanapada coins from like 500 BC. So this is what I meant in the sense that I'd like to inject just a bit of that archaeology into the thought process of the whole thing. And yes, unlike what you might think, most people think in their heads that, it's only the priests who sort of had this matted hair and beard and whatnot. In the Vedic era, both the priests and the warriors had it. Very ornate crowns and whatnot are a relatively later development, at least historically, particularly towards the Maurya and the Gupta era, which is, from 200 to 200 BC onwards. So this is how the kings would have looked. And this bit is just to represent the multiple eyes of Indra, right? He's called Sahasrayuga, which is like 1,000-eyed. So this is just like a quasi-psychedelic. It's fiery, it has some element of fire and lightning, both. So that was just the thought process. And these nodes you see here are, so there's this concept in the Atharva Veda. It's called Indra's net. So it's basically like the node, you would have definitely heard this even in like Buddhist thought process. So it's like the nodes of existence. So that's why I made it sort of like, quasi-psychedelic. So yeah, this is the piece. And so
I mean, this has been interpreted by Morrison himself. When he goes into even in DC comic books, I know it sounds like really pedestrian right now, but even in DC comic books, and when they talk about multiple realities, etc., this is the same concept which they use. And even if you go back to the Nordic mythology, instead of the multiple eyes, it's the crows or the corvid birds, who serve, who can travel realms and you can see what's going on and serve as spies for Odin. So essentially, yeah. So I think that's the cross pollination aspect, and how far this lore has traveled.
Yeah, Morrison definitely derives. I mean, he's been pretty open about it as well, about the inspiration from Hindu cosmology in terms of the planes of existence. That, of course, he marries with the sort of Abrahamic, Jewish stuff about the Kabbalah, the various layers of existence and the tree of life, both him and Alan Moore. So, I mean, anyone who sort of contemplates upon the structure of existence will inevitably come upon these kind of concepts. So, yeah.
No, that was brilliant. Yeah, the last piece, your latest piece, was absolutely fantastic. So, thank you for sharing. It's really terrific stuff. But considering how you're talking about uh, really ancient times, doing it in a very modern way, using modern tech, how would you view yourself and your art? Are you a disruptor or are you a bridge between the past and the present?
I would say, see, maybe the first thought would be like, you'd think it's between the past and the present. But I would say I'm a disruptor. Solely because these Vedic deities, these Vedic stories, both the regular storytelling as well as the esoteric layers of them have been completely lost. As in general narrative in the minds of like the general population and the cultural zeitgeist as it is, right? So these might be told subconsciously as like mantras and whatnot, but even by priests. But even those priests are not consciously thinking about this. It's something that they've sort of learned out of discipline and rote. But in terms of like which gods the devotion is directed towards, it's the post-Vedic gods, which is starting from the epics, which is like Ramayana and Mahabharata, and flowing down to the Puranas and so on and so forth. What most people think of Hinduism today is that. So what I am trying to disrupt that sort of thinking in the sense that, hey guys, you've forgotten a vast swath of culture and like a giant library, a corpus of books that talk about something else altogether. Yes, they do speak to each other, but there are some like in the later texts, as many people would know, Indra is often maligned. Right? He's seen as he's like just a caricature of the classical Indian ruler at that point. So that isn't the true essence of Indra. I have a lot of hot takes in that regard as to why it may have happened. Does it have a sort of socio-political angle to it in ancient India? Is it because a lot of these metaphysical ideas are also like vehicles for people to have their real life fights over, right? So I do think at some point, people who wanted to put down those, say, kingdoms or like classes of priests who hailed and venerated Indra for like generations together, sort of came together and did a retroactive continuity change. So, I mean, that's a rabbit hole in on itself. It's highly speculative, like the downfall of Indra and whatnot and why. But I think the early Vedic corpus speaks for itself in terms of unequivocally hailing him as not just the king of gods, but the god of gods, as well as the very essence of existence, as I showed you in that piece, and the sort of deity in whom all the deities are housed. That is highly contrast to the way he's portrayed later on. So yes, I would say I'm a disruptor in the sense that I'm definitely going to challenge the way people think of him specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, I was obsessed with the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, Indra's depiction is pretty much like what you said just now, right? Like a caricature. He's the king of the gods, king of heaven, however you want to look at it. But he's very much side character, I guess you could say, right? And someone that no one ever takes him seriously, at least in the Mahabharata. So when I first started looking at your art and reading about it and things like that, you definitely disrupted my thought process about Indra. So yeah, I would agree with you being a disruptor in your art for sure. And this was also something that I wanted to ask, so I'm very happy you brought it up on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on for hours about this, but I would say in the epics, it's still a bit more respectful, right? Because he's
Yeah.
the father of Arjuna, and in fact, in the Ramayana, Lakshmana tells Rama, "Oh, Rama, you are like Indra, so why do you have to worry? Everything is going to turn out okay." So you can see he's still respected in that. I would say it's the later sort of sectarian Puranic texts which malign him, but I would say those texts malign all other gods in favor of their favored god. Right?
Yeah.
So to that end, again, hot take, but I would say you can see the human touch in them. Whereas in the Vedas, it's a group of deities and Indra is first among equals.
Yeah.
That's how they always present it. And I much prefer personally, in terms of my spiritual beliefs, that approach rather than any approach that seeks to demean other divinities. So
Great. So, I think final question, unless Abhi's got some more. But so today you're seeing, so much of modern art is, you would say, digital and disposable. So, how do you ensure, or how do you plan to ensure the future of your own work?
it's a tricky question, considering I'm primarily a digital artist. But when people challenge me for being a digital artist as opposed to physical, I'm like, it's primarily like our musician friends. I always ask them, are you going to give up your amplifier? So to that end, I don't know how to answer that question, GK. There are lots of disruptors in the creative world, particularly with the advent of AI, needless to say, right? So, but as I think I read this somewhere, or I sort of came to the conclusion also on my own parallelly, is that more than how it looks, which is also very important, the why of behind the art is going to become increasingly more important. I don't see any future in which AI feels strongly about a certain topic as a human does, right? There's an emotional resonance, there is a research aspect, there's an ideological aspect attached to it as well. I don't think a machine can ever be ideological. So to that end, I think humans are safe, but I'm not going to jinx it. So
Right. I think I think this was like a deeply one of the most deeper conversations that we've had thus far on this channel, because just like your art, I think a lot of liminal spaces were explored between the sacred and between your explorations of sacred and the profane, your the conversations or the cross pollination between the traditional and the invention, and obviously the fact that you serve yourself as a disruptor or a bridge. I think it would do a great service that people actually go and check out your art and support said art, considering that you have like yearly calendars which come out as well, and you're open for commissions as well.
yes, to both indeed.
Yeah, so do check out Achintya's art. It's incredible, and I cannot reiterate and put it strongly enough the amount of research that goes into each of the captions, which are very, very evocative depictions of what you can see in front of your screen. So it is not another run of the mill artist just putting stuff up on Instagram and selling you prints, which is admirable in its own way, but there's a lot of work which goes inside that as well. So thank you, Achintya, for your time.
Thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, GK, and grateful for this platform. Grateful for your patronage and, of course, your friendship. So, cheers. It was an awesome conversation. Much more to be said, of course, but this was an awesome one.
Yeah, we'd absolutely love to have you back here. This has been great. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for sharing your art and your thought process. You'll find Achintya's Instagram page details in the description, so go follow, take a look at everything that he does, and it is really something special and totally worth it. So, yeah, and if you like this, as usual, subscribe, share, like the video, blah blah, do all of that stuff. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Cheers.
Adios, gentlemen.
Thanks, man.
All right, that was good.